Ingrid Marie Ron-Seville was born on August 2, 1975, in Reeton, Washington. She was the only daughter of George Boss, her devoted mother and sole known immediate family member. Ingrid completed her high school education at Canyon del Oro High School in Tucson, Arizona, 1993, graduating in 12th. She then pursued a nursing degree at a local university, earning her Bachelor of Science in Nursing 4 years later. About 3 years after graduating, Ingrid returned to Washington, where she met Philip Linné. The couple eventually married, and she took his surname, becoming Ingrid Linné for the remainder of her life. Motherhood soon brought her immense joy, with the births of her daughters Ree, Brooke, and Noel, each arriving 2 years apart. Her daughters became her greatest source of happiness and purpose. Around 2014, Ingrid and Philip's marriage faced challenges, leading to an amicable divorce with shared custody of the girls. Despite the separation, Ingrid maintained her vibrant and energetic personality. At this time, Ingrid was working as a nurse at Swedish Medical Center, where she earned the respect and admiration of doctors, patients, and colleagues alike for her dedication and professionalism. Her career was clearly the second most important aspect of her life. Following her daughters, her relationship with Philip had evolved into a supportive friendship, which helped them co-parent their girls effectively and provided a stable, nurturing environment for their upbringing. Ingrid also relied heavily on the support of her mother, Georgia, who played a vital role in both her life and that of her granddaughters. By 2016, 2 years after her divorce, Ingrid had established a comfortable routine. She enjoyed her work, which provided a reliable income, and lived with her 3 daughters in Reeton, Washington, a convenient 32-minute drive from her workplace. Socially, Ingrid was fortunate to have close, genuine friendships that added richness to her life. Overall, she was content with her circumstances. But in her early 40s, she began to desire a romantic partner, a need that her existing social circle could not fulfill. This led her to explore online dating, where she interacted with several men, but struggled to find a meaningful connection. That changed when she met someone who sparked her interest, John Charlton. Born in the late 1970s in Seattle, John was the son of Rye and Joan Charlton, both military personnel who instilled strict discipline in him and his sister Shannon. They held high expectations for their children, ensuring they received the best education possible and contributed to household responsibilities. However, it quickly became apparent that John was not meeting his parents' expectations. He harbored deep-seated resentment toward them and others, a sentiment that persisted throughout his life. His frustrations frequently surfaced, particularly when he was under the influence of alcohol or drugs, substances he often relied upon. His legal troubles began in 1997 with a misdemeanor assault charge in King County, followed by a reckless driving charge in Washington State the following year. Over time, Jay's relationship with his parents deteriorated further, culminating in 2006 when Rye and Joanne, exhausted and at their wits' end, sought a protective order against him. Despite their repeated attempts to maintain a workable household, John's erratic and unpredictable behavior made even basic agreements impossible. His increasingly threatening and aggressive demeanor prompted the protective order request in Thurston County, where Ray reported that his son was verbally abusive and frequently sought to provoke confrontations. However, the request for a protective order was ultimately denied. Rye explained to the court that his son's ongoing substance abuse was driven by intense pressure he felt, which had contributed to significant mental instability. On June 24, 2006, south of Ogden, Utah, a woman and her baby were waiting in the back seat of their van while her husband shopped in a bookstore. Suddenly, John appeared, ordered them out of the vehicle, and drove off with the van. Police were immediately alerted, and the stolen vehicle was tracked on Interstate 15. An officer followed it to a store parking lot in Riverdale, Utah, where John was arrested. According to Utah police and court records, he was charged with aggravated robbery, but ultimately agreed to plead guilty to a lesser charge of attempted aggravated robbery. He was sentenced to 1 to 15 years in prison. However, John served only about 21 months of his sentence and was released on June 24, 2008. Within a few months, he added to his criminal record with a felony robbery conviction in Montana and a misdemeanor assault in Idaho. He spent roughly 3.5 years in prison before being released in 2012. From that point forward, details about his life became increasingly unclear. One factor that may have made John particularly dangerous was his physical attractiveness. He was a handsome man with a charismatic personality when he chose to be. Traits he sometimes used to manipulate others through romance and seduction, before ultimately expressing his anger. One thing was certain: John was far from ordinary, and neither was the chaotic nature of his daily life. Around mid-2012, John took a temporary job where he began a relationship with a co-worker. At first, she was drawn to his charm, but subtle signs in his behavior, something unsettling and hard to define, made her wary. Trusting her instincts, she chose to end the relationship, and by 2013, they had gone their separate ways. Afterward, several other women became involved in Jay's life, though their identities remain confidential for security reasons. These women were later interviewed by authorities about Jay's criminal history and personality. In their statements, his ex-girlfriends described aggressive and dangerous behavior, as well as admissions by John to serious crimes, claims that authorities were working to verify. Broadly speaking, Jay's life lacked stability, both personally and professionally. Essentially a homeless day laborer, he would sleep either on the streets or at the homes of ex-girlfriends, with whom he maintained casual connections. Among his acquaintances, John was known as a reserved individual, but under the influence of alcohol or illicit substances, he could become almost unrecognizable. This complicated personality, paired with his physical attractiveness, which often opened doors for him, was exactly how Ingrid came to meet him through an online dating site. After exchanging messages and discovering mutual interest, they agreed to meet in person. Their first date was scheduled for Friday, April 8th, with plans to watch the Seattle Mariners' opening game and, if things went well, go out for drinks afterward. The night before, Ingrid shared her plans with friends and coordinated with Philip so he could care for their daughters that evening. On April 8th, John and Ingrid attended the baseball game, which began shortly after 7 p.m. They enjoyed the outing enough to continue the evening at a nearby bar. Around 10:35 p.m., Ingrid texted a friend to say that things were going well with her new companion. However, the night soon took a horrifying turn. Instead of the intimacy she had anticipated, Ingrid's decision to bring John back to her home would prove fatal. Tragically, she met a violent end. The seemingly pleasant man she had met online revealed a dark and deadly side. He murdered her and then dismembered her body using a sharp gardening tool. After cleaning the scene, he placed her remains into plastic bags he found in the kitchen. He then took Ingrid's car keys and drove her 2015 Toyota Highlander to Seattle, where he disposed of her body. John likely continued drinking after disposing of the evidence, as he did not appear at his ex-girlfriend's home later that night or the following morning, despite her expecting him early on Saturday. Meanwhile, that same morning, Philip arrived at Ingrid's house around 10 a.m. to drop off their daughters. He knocked repeatedly, but received no response. Upon closer inspection, he noticed that Ingrid's vehicle, usually parked outside, was missing. This was unusual, as he knew she was off work that day, which had been the reason for her plans the previous evening. Ingrid had always been a devoted mother, keeping her daughters close, and she was typically at home whenever Philip brought them over. If her evening had lasted longer than expected, Philip trusted that Ingrid would have told him to keep the girls longer. Growing concerned by her absence, he knocked repeatedly and called her cell phone multiple times, but received no answer. He then decided to contact Ingrid's mother, Georgia, who arrived shortly after with a spare set of keys that Ingrid had given her for emergencies. Upon entering the house, they immediately noticed that Ingrid's wallet, purse, and cell phone had been left behind. Yet, there was no sign of her. Georgia quickly checked the last messages on her daughter's phone and saw texts from John regarding the previous night's date. She then sent a message to John, asking if he knew where Ingrid was. He responded that they had indeed gone out the night before, but parted ways after the game because Ingrid needed to return home to her daughters. She told John that a police officer would need to speak with him, as he might have been the last person to see Ingrid. After that, all communication from him stopped, prompting Ingrid's mother to contact the authorities. A few hours later, while the police were beginning their investigation, a Seattle resident was about to make a horrifying discovery. As he took out his recycling, he noticed 3 white kitchen bags at the bottom of another bin, clearly out of place. Since kitchen waste is organic and shouldn't be in recycling, he went to correct the error. When he picked up the first bag, he was struck by its unusual weight and nearly professional wrapping. Seconds later, he recoiled in horror as he saw the outline of a face pressing against the bag. Shocked, he called a neighbor to verify what he was seeing, and both were left in disbelief. After contacting emergency services, police and forensic teams arrived within minutes. Inside the 3 bags were human remains, a leg and foot, part of an arm, and a head. Back in Washington, as panic spread among Ingrid's friends and family, they turned to social media to alert the community, authorities, and the media about her disappearance. Suspicion quickly focused on the man she had recently dated. Meanwhile, John visited his ex-girlfriend's house, though she noticed he had a swollen lip. He dismissed it as insignificant, claiming it resulted from an attempted robbery the night before he went out to a bar. At the same time, Seattle police learned that their counterparts in Renton were investigating a missing woman, a situation further amplified by social media posts. This information allowed authorities to connect the dots. By comparing the photos shared online with the remains found, they confirmed that both belonged to Ingrid. A search warrant was issued for her home, and a thorough inspection uncovered an almost empty box of garbage bags similar to those discovered in the dumpster. Bloody traces were also found in the bathtub drain. Perhaps the most damning evidence was a pruning saw, smeared with blood, tissue, and bone, leaning against the bathroom wall. Examination of Ingrid's computer confirmed her purchase of tickets for the Mariners game. Considering her connection to Philip, police initially investigated him as a potential suspect, given that an ex-husband might harbor resentment. However, he was quickly ruled out. The car was eventually located in downtown Seattle on the night of April 11, 2016. Police lifted 3 fingerprints from beneath the driver's door handle, where they also found the same type of white garbage bags. Officers subsequently interviewed John. His online dating profile suggested he wasn't seeking a serious relationship, but that alone was not a crime. At first glance, he appeared to be an ordinary man. When questioned about his residence to ensure authorities could reach him again, John admitted he did not have a fixed address. Officers noticed his unease when asked about Ingrid. He claimed that after the baseball game, they took a bus to Ingrid's house. He suggested there might have been an intimate encounter, but he was unsure, saying he had passed out. He added that Ingrid had not wanted to introduce him to her daughters and had later left him downtown. He said he woke up hours later on a bench in front of a building, recalling only fragments of his last interaction with her. John claimed he had sent her a message that morning, asking how she had slept. As investigators probed further, they uncovered his unusual relationship with an ex-girlfriend. Though this alone was not illegal, John eventually requested a lawyer. Officers left the room, but continued recording on video. If anyone already found him odd, what followed confirmed it. The cameras captured John rolling up his sweatshirt to use as a pillow while he took a nap on the floor. The next step involved interviewing Jay's ex-girlfriend, who reported that he had arrived later than expected that Saturday and noted his bruised lip. While this detail seemed striking, it wasn't entirely surprising to investigators, who had already observed abrasions on his head and scratches on his chin, chest, and arms. Fingerprint analysis subsequently confirmed that the prints on Ingrid's car matched Jay's. As a result, on Monday, April 11, 2016, John was brought before a judge who set his bail at $5 million, a sum he could not afford. He was therefore detained as the primary suspect in Ingrid's murder. Several of John's former friends and ex-girlfriends came forward to assist law enforcement, and an extensive search for the remainder of Ingrid's body was launched, involving the FBI and other regional agencies. Due to the gruesome nature of the crime, John was assigned a public defender who argued that no forensic evidence or expert testimony directly linked him to the murder. However, on Tuesday, April 12th, the judge rejected these arguments and found probable cause to hold him on a charge of second-degree murder. That evening, hundreds gathered near Ingrid's home for a vigil in her memory. Those who knew her spoke of her outstanding personal qualities, and friends described the pain of her loss as an open wound. They emphasized that the hardest blow fell on her family, particularly her mother and 3 daughters, who were deeply affected by the tragedy. The following day, Wednesday, April 13, the county coroner officially confirmed that the remains belonged to Ingrid. The preliminary autopsy report identified blunt force trauma as the cause of death. While the exact date of the crime could not be determined, 2 days later, a sanitation worker discovered additional body parts in a separate recycling bin. On April 18, a man received a call from a neighbor alerting him to a torso found in his recycling bin, notable for a pierced navel. Since Ingrid had a navel piercing, this confirmed the remains were hers, contributing crucial evidence for the trial. Police returned to Ingrid's home and dismantled parts of the plumbing, uncovering more blood in the newly exposed drain trap. They also applied luminol, a chemical that glows in the presence of blood, which confirmed that the crime scene had been deliberately cleaned. Despite the initial conclusions in the preliminary autopsy, further examination by the forensic pathologist revealed additional details. Small traces of bleeding were observed in Ingrid's eyes, and marks on her neck confirmed that she had been strangled. Her body was subsequently dismembered in her own home. The toxicology report showed no drugs in her system, though her blood alcohol content was 0.74. On October 2, 2017, in a King County courtroom, John pled guilty to first-degree premeditated murder. His guilty plea was part of a plea bargain that allowed for a shortened trial, sparing Ingrid's family and the community from the ordeal of a lengthy and distressing jury process. However, this plea was not offered solely as an act of mercy to lessen the suffering of the victim's family. The plea also provided John with certain procedural advantages. His sentencing hearing took place on January 5, 2019. John's parents attended the court, both to show support for their son and to acknowledge the grief endured by Ingrid's family. During his brief statement, John admitted that no words could ever undo the pain he had caused, acknowledging the irreversible damage of his actions. Impact statements from Ingrid's family were deeply moving. Philip condemned John for taking away not only a cherished companion, but also the mother of their children, lamenting the maternal guidance and treasured family moments that his daughters would now be forever denied. He stressed that because of John's actions, his daughters would never again receive maternal advice. A friend of Ingrid, visibly shaken, spoke of the sheer brutality with which John had ended her dear friend's life, labeling him a coward for initially attempting to flee and hide rather than take responsibility. John claimed he was too intoxicated to remember his actions when finally confronted by the police. Addressing him in court, the judge expressed that she would have imposed a life sentence if it had been possible. Instead, she sentenced him to 17 years and 9 months in prison, following the prosecutor's recommendation as part of the plea deal that allowed for a shortened trial. Ultimately, This sentence represented the harshest penalty permitted under state sentencing guidelines. A member of Jay's defense team expressed hope that his guilty plea and prison term might provide some closure and a measure of peace to Ingrid's loved ones. The media coverage of the sentencing sparked significant public outcry, with many expressing outrage that John could potentially be released by the age of 60. Furthermore, Jay's refusal to provide a motive for his actions worked against him. No additional arrests were made in connection with Ingrid's disappearance. Her tragic death has prompted widespread discussions about the risks associated with online dating. Meanwhile, Philip has dedicated himself to the well-being of his daughters, honoring the wishes of their mother. In this spirit, a fundraising page established for the three young girls successfully raised $270,000.